Hi everyone. My name's Corey Hanley, and I'm going to talk about The First Love by Ivan Turgenev, which is an interesting story that entails the exact title of the book. So we've all read the literature, and we understand that the story is told from the viewpoint of Vladimir Pertrinich, the young bachelor. And while you're reading, you probably noticed that it's written more of like a autobiography type than it is a narrative. So the article that I read in regard to this story was the opening frame and the presentation of The First Love by Robert Lagerberg. And in his article, he explains the way that the story was written, important parts of the story that, if you were like me, you probably missed. So, what I'll discuss in order to help you guys understand um, what I learned about the story is the author's main point for the article, what the article is about, what Lagenberg is trying to show us, how he proves his point, and lastly, if it was helpful or not, in my opinion. So, the main point of this article was to show us that Ivan Turgenev framed his literature a little differently. Lagenberg shows us that there are different ways of framing literature, and the way that it was done in The First Love is actually kind of unique. So the article is about, um, well, the article contains a basic summary of the narrative, and it goes into detail about certain things that make the story a little more credible. For instance, the age of Valdemar Pertrinich and his love is actually quite younger. Um, in the story, they're 21 and 16, and in real life, it was actually 18 and 14, I believe. Um, and lastly, the article contains an analysis of why the story did not end where it began. So we know the story ended with the end of Valdemar Pertrinich and his love, his first love story. That's where the story ended. And it began with all these bachelors sitting around a table talking about their first love. So we want to know how they were connected and why it wasn't an obvious connection. So what Ladenburg is trying to show us was he's trying to help us understand the Ivan Turgenev way of framing. Um, the way that he did it in this story was at the beginning he set the theme for the narrative. He set the theme of that we're going to be talking about first love. And he did this by having the men sit around the table and explicitly say, we're going to be talking about our first love. This leads into the inner narrative by Vladimir Pertrinich. And because of the beginning of the story, his inner narrative is embedded into a larger picture. Um, and the story does not need to return to all the men sitting around the table at the end because the story is complete after he finishes his love story. Um, and the way that Ladenburg proves his point is I'll give you a summary of how he proved his point, and it was basically completing a circle of events. So the men start the circle by talking about their love, and when Valdemar Perchinich starts his love story, he starts at his childhood. So he starts his love story here, and then he ends his story at adulthood. So that circle is complete. And because he was talking about his first love the entire time, it doesn't change the fact that he's still sitting around the table with his friends. And that's why the circle is already complete and it doesn't need to go back and reiterate the fact that they're sitting all together. This was actually extremely helpful to me to read afterwards because I didn't completely understand the way the story was written. Without this, I would have had a really hard time connecting the opening scene with the rest of the narrative. So I hope this helps you um, understand Ivan Turgenev's um, framing techniques, and it helps us all work to understand romanticism a little more in Russia. So happy holidays and have a good break.